The Brewtally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia. For over 30 years, they have been the go-to destination for all your music merch needs. From working with today's hottest bands to create truly one-of-a-kind pieces, as well as boasting a truly massive online store, Rockabilia is your one-stop shop when it comes to band merch. Use our code BREWtally at checkout and take 10% off your total purchase order. Huge thanks to Rockabilia for their continued support, and now, on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brewtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is the returning Matt McAndrew of Rain City Drive. And this was a fun one. It's not often that, in doing these shows, yes, I'll have returning guests, and obviously we kind of pick up the conversation, that we had from previously. In a lot of instances, I become somewhat friends with a lot of these people, and either through texting, DMs, or just, seeing them when they come through town, able to kind of build on the rapport that we have and, kind of speaking to things that have happened and that we've experienced in that time. And this one with Matt is interesting to me, and it was interesting leading up to it because, we did the conversation years ago before, their first record with Matt came out. They were still known as Slaves, and there was a lot of firsts for this band that was about to happen, but hadn't happened yet. And so it was really interesting to kind of think about even the name change. Like, I had bust balls in the beginning, but, that was a question I had asked him initially was, with all the newness of the band, kind of changing the sound a little bit and all these things, was there ever kind of a thought of, let's get away from this band, the old name, all this stuff, and just kind of start anew? Not as a new project per se, but just maybe a fresh start would be good. And I remember him saying no at the time. So it was really interesting to hear, obviously the answer that you'll hear in a couple minutes. But it was a thing where it's funny to kind of look back and just think about where we've come and all the things that have happened and all the growth. And especially for Rain City Drive, obviously, linking up with my buddy Andrew from Idola and Dance Gavin Dancing and hitting the road really hard with those guys. And honestly, it just seems like since Matt has been in the band, this band has just been a road-tested band, like just hitting the hard road very hard. And I can say from the handful of shows I've seen over the last couple of years in different markets and cities and so forth, that it seems like the band is really hitting like a new stride, essentially, of fandom and all that kind of stuff. And it seems like from the live show, fans are really just interested in what the band has been doing since Matt's been in the band. Like, I think they play a couple of older songs at this point, but for the most part now, it's all stuff with Matt. And it seems like these songs are going over very well. And it's just great to see, kind of a band that really took a chance. I think when a lot of others probably would have been like, this is bad, we're just done. And it becomes something else, that they persevered in spite of, some of the challenges that they were dealing with past members, and are now on the other side, I think, stronger and putting out music that I think really suits who they all are individually and collectively. And to kind of have Matt be at the forefront of that, I think is really big. Obviously even talking about, working with Rory from Dayseeker, who has also been on the show. And it's funny just to kind of think about, to me, some of these people that I have on the show, and I don't want to say that they're not known, but it's really interesting, like, I don't know if I were to try to get Rory to do the podcast now, I don't think I could even get him. It's funny to think back to some of these bands and some of the people in these bands, and it's like, yeah, I don't think I can get them anymore. I think they're at such a level that they just are too big for me now. And it's interesting because I feel like, to a degree, Rain City Drive potentially could be that next band where I'm like, Yeah, it was really cool getting to have Matt on a couple of times when they were on the come up, and now they're just too big to do the show. I say this with a smile on my face. I don't know if you can hear it coming through, but it's a good thing. Honestly, it's great to see people doing well. It's inspiring to see people doing well in spite of the obstacles, either quote unquote self-made industry things happening, whatever. It's just really great to see people succeeding and kind of doing it on their own terms and knowing when to stand by themselves and bet on themselves and to watch it pay off. So to me, it's great. It's inspiring. And it's one of those things where it was really great getting to talk with Matt. We even kind of dip into a lot more of kind of the behind the scenes of the music industry and stuff like that. And it seems like when we've been doing that recently, it's really resonated with a lot of you. So I'm really glad that a lot of you are into these things, because I know how much I am, and it's really great to kind of share these things that I talk about with people off record when we do it on record, that it is something that a lot of you do enjoy hearing. Because the music industry and the behind the scenes stuff is really fucking fascinating, especially when you start getting into finances and a lot of the things that make this quote unquote job, this industry, this thing that some people want a career in, makes it even more challenging to do such and make any kind of an impact. So without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Matt, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. So it's kind of been funny though. Speaking of kind of music and all that kind of stuff, I feel like when we last chatted, the last actually, I should say your first record, To Better Days, hadn't even come out yet. And so we were discussing a lot of new things for you, new things for the band. And it's funny because I always said if I had you back on, I would kind of bust your balls a little bit, because I had asked you back then with how the record to me felt, and especially in some of the lyrics and the songs and stuff, how it felt like just a big refresher for the band, for you, for a lot of things. I was kind of surprised to see you carry on with the band name. And I had asked, was there ever any inclination to change the band name at all? And you were like, no, because, we love what the band was and we want to honor, all the different eras of it and, the music and so forth. And then I think not even, I could be wrong with my timeline, but I feel like maybe it was like 3 or 4 months after the record came out. It's like, we're no longer slaves. We're Rain City Drive. And I was like, you motherfucker.
Damn. No, we put out the statement before the album dropped.
Okay. Then it was very quickly after we did our chat. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I remember doing some interviews around the time and like trying. It just depends on how early it was, because I know there were some leading up to it that were kind of awkward, because I was so over the name at that point, like before the record came out, that I was like, something needs to change. And I just remember being like, and I think like, label, band, everything, like nobody was on like the total unified front about like what the plan should be on how to do that and like when to execute that. So I don't know, maybe I was trying to hold my tongue or something, but it did get to a certain point. I remember even before the record came out where people were asking me, and I was just like, it's not good. We're gonna change it, like whatever, like, because like I'm not gonna like lie if somebody asks my opinion about it. But yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely. I mean, I was brainstorming names like the end of the first tour we ever did together. Because I was like, once it became apparent that I was maybe going to join up with the guys, I was like, is there a way we can change this to something that like makes a little more sense, like from a branding standpoint, from like representing the 5 of us standpoint and whatever. So, we did get there, but it was definitely a back and forth in terms of like getting the whole team on board of like the timing and how to execute that. So I was always in favor of trying to do it like before that record even dropped, because I was like, it's gonna get changed anyways. But it just, the contracts and everything we had in place at the time just kind of wouldn't allow that. But that was my thing.
Yeah, because I was trying to remember too, because I know you guys made the statement. Like I said, I wasn't sure if my timeline was right because it's been so long that I was like, I'm fairly certain, like, because I think the first single or the promo single had essentially come out. We did a chat. I think the second single was coming out maybe the week after our chat, and the record wasn't going to be out for another at least almost month, I think. But I had gotten the album.
Okay.
And I remember thinking when that announcement happened, I was like, shit, did you guys get it changed in time before the vinyls and everything went out? Or is there going to be like that fun limited edition thing where it's like, all right, we pressed the one amount and it's going to be out, and then now we have a whole nother batch coming out with a different name, and it kind of becomes a collector's item?
I mean that would have been cool, honestly. All our new vinyls for that are Rain City Drive.
Yeah, and it's on on the DSPs as well.
Yeah, it just took a while, and then even when we did split the bands and make it like officially a new band and Slaves catalog here, Rain City Drive catalog over here, it's like that was a process that I feel like people were kind of like, what's going on, whatever, because like there was a minute where like everything was under Rain City Drive, and then fans were like, oh, that's not cool, or like no, like that's also not the plan. Like things just take time, and I mean, fuck, dude, like even with this album, it's like they're always done at least a year before they come out, and it's just like so yeah, that was kind of a logistical thing, but very, very important to me personally to get that done, and I'm glad that it happened, and everybody's obviously really stoked and it worked out. So, but yeah.
I think the thing that was really kind of interesting for me to see kind of from afar was, having seen, I think, one of your first tours with the band and it coming through here in Grand Rapids to the Stash when you guys are playing.
Okay.
To then, the homie Andrew or Matt. Sorry, I'm looking at something real quick. So Andrew from Idola, Dance Gavin Dance, he was just here on their tour a couple of days ago. He says hi, by the way.
What's up?
And he was making the comments because he was like, oh, I haven't, love touring with them because you guys hit the road between with Idola and Dance Gavin Dance quite a bit. Yeah. And it was a thing where it was really interesting to me because I got to see that tour you guys did in Atlanta with my wife. And it was really kind of interesting just to see the growth of the band. And I feel like almost for once, it feels like the rebrand actually really worked in a band's favor, and that fans kind of really took to the rebrand. And to compare the show before, when you're just basically playing the old material, 100%. Nothing of your own, and then now hitting out, and at that point, the self-titled album had already been or had just come out. But I feel like seeing fans flocking to your merch, buying the album, knowing the words to the new songs, knowing the stuff for like the two albums, it just felt like you could feel a growth in the band. And to see something like that for a band that's been around that long, and more to the point, for a band that you've only been a part of for a short amount of time, I thought was really interesting to see, and probably had to feel really rewarding to kind of all of those risks and all of those things of like, we're kind of betting on ourselves and we want to start something new with each other and bet on ourselves, to kind of have it pay off so quickly probably is really rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely surprised. I mean, I think that, it was definitely a chance worth taking. Like I said, I was so over the name at that point. I didn't want to tell anybody. I'm like, oh yeah, the name of the band is Slaves. It just felt negative any way you want to slice it. Like still, like if you Google it, like what kind of imagery do you think comes up? It's like not anything that's like cool or positive,
Right.
And I get where they were coming from, like slaves to our addictions or whatever, like also not something I relate to or want to relate to.
Slave to your past.
Yeah, right. So I was like, let's do something fresh. Let's make it a fresh band and whatever. But kind of easier said than done, right? And so it was really surprising on that first RCD tour. It was only like 2 years ago. And like immediately fans being like RCD and like, hey, it's Rain City Drive, whatever. I'm like, oh, cool. Like it was cool to hear it, because I think at that point we were like the band with no name for a minute there. Like it felt like we had everything going except for like official, new name, new band announce. and it was interesting. So for that to be the last puzzle piece to fall in place was kind of unique. I feel like usually people like somebody, scribbles a name on a notebook and then like, all right, we need to find a drummer. We need to try to write a song and whatever. But yeah, man, it was really cool. And as much as I, love touring on the Beautiful Death stuff with the guys and really did enjoy that music and everything, that was always in my mind as a songwriter being like, the only thing to make this way better would be to have it be like something that I was a part of, so.
Right. Well, I was going to say, kind of remembering bits and pieces of our conversation, that was something when talking about To Better Days, you had kind of talked about how you studied Johnny's, literally how he did his vocals. Like you were talking about how, a lot of times he likes to sit in this register, and on occasions,
100%.
at least once an album, he'll do this thing. And
Right.
It sounds very similar to how I listen back to episodes I'll do. So like when this comes out and I post it, I'll listen to it and be like, oh, I cut that person off, or I'll study it kind of like game tape, like, like a sporting
Right.
thing, like where you're like just studying yourself and how to be better, or studying an opponent essentially and learning like all of their tricks and, how to be better prepared for them. And to me, like when you said that, I was like, that's a really interesting way to approach writing for yourself to kind of keep the old man satiated. But now I wondered, two records in, a couple of singles. Presumably there's going to be some more stuff probably coming because it just sort of seems to be the nature now where it's singles based, maybe an EP, and that kind of keeps you going into, the lead up to either a full length or more touring or whatever. But do you feel more comfortable to not have to adhere to quote unquote rules of somebody else and just being what you want and what the band wants the song to be?
For sure. I mean, I at that time, I think even less than trying to satiate the fan base, it was more just like trying to shut up the haters. Like I just seen way too many comments about like, this guy sucks, this guy doesn't have any range. And I was like, all right, bet. What is Johnny's range on these records? Okay, he's doing this. All right, I'm gonna hit all that. Okay, like that was kind of where I was, where my head was at. And but which honestly was great. Because I really did grow a lot as a vocalist. Like, shout out to Johnny, he's a great singer, and like that gave me a chip on my shoulder that was really beneficial to me. So it was great. I feel like I'm somebody that does well in those situations. Like if somebody says that I can't do something, I'm like, all right, But yeah, I mean, in terms of, it seems like every record I tell myself post To Better Days, like that I don't have anything to prove anymore, that I don't need to whatever. And then I always wind up just making it harder on myself vocally for no reason. So I know self-titled, I sang higher than I did on To Better Days. And then on this record, I sang higher than I did on that one. And just I think it's just fun, or it's just whatever the song calls for. But yeah, I'm definitely not coming from a place of like, I really gotta, necessarily do something showier than I've done in the past. But for every album, I want to try to just expand on the sound of the band, which I think is a sentiment that we all share collectively for sure. Just if us as this for the first album, and then maybe the second album, we keep some of those themes and then we expand a little bit and expand a little, you know what I mean? Until eventually it's like, there's a lot of stuff that could be considered part of our sound. Yeah.
Well, I think that was sort of the really interesting thing about kind of seeing you sort of essentially, quote unquote, two tours back to back, or two album cycles sort of back to back, like pre and post you having your own material, was kind of, I don't want to say you weren't confident in performing the old material, but I just feel like maybe there wasn't an attachment to the old material for you, because you would have to just find something that you're like, all right, this kind of means blank to me, whatever that is.
Sure.
And I think, and this sounds really shitty to say it like this, but it's like when someone can hear a song and you're like, oh my God, it means this. And it probably doesn't have anything to do with those things, but
100%.
You can't tell someone like, well, actually it's this, because you don't want to take that thing away, that connection to it. But I feel like the thing people forget sort of is that if you're the one performing a song that you didn't write and you have to kind of find your way through it, it's only going to be a matter of time before you're going to be probably like the original person writing it, where you're like, dude, I am so over this fucking song. I don't want to play it. I don't care about it. But there's something to be said, I think, where it's it was really interesting, and I'm sorry to kind of harp on just the duality of like the conversation we had versus like seeing you now a couple of times since.
Dude,
But I
honestly,
think it's really interesting because I'm more interested in the growth of people. And I used to have this philosophy where I'd be like, I don't want to have repeat guests because what's the point? If we had a great conversation, how do we top it? But to me, as I've gotten older now, I think about it's cool because it's almost like an audio snapshot. And essentially that's what a record is, where it's like, this is a conversation and I can go back to the one we had a few years ago and I notice different things about you. I notice different things about you as an artist and who you probably are. Sure. And I want to kind of figure that out because I think maybe someone listening to this that maybe is struggling as a vocalist or as someone stepping into a position where maybe it's not, they're kind of thrust into a role maybe they didn't want. How do you adapt? How do you make it your own? How do you thrive maybe in these high pressure situations? And to me, that's sort of the interesting thing about having this conversation now, all these years later, is to kind of dissect that a little bit and kind of look at it through the prism of now, while also kind of looking back where maybe even you don't, because I think, and this is something else I've talked about quite a bit on the show that I had after doing a mushroom trip one time, but just the idea of time and that we exist in kind of no time, but in all time. So we exist in our present, we're moving forward, we kind of look back. You as an artist, especially in the music space, you are making something, like you just alluded to the fact that like typically by the time a record comes out, you've already had it for a year. So 100%. You have to, whatever you're experiencing now is what informs you of what you're going to do on the next record or the next track you're working on.
Right.
We won't get that for however long. So then you have to traverse back into time and figure out who you were, what you were doing, and remember all those things and kind of reconnect with those to then do something like this or even perform the songs, while also looking way ahead because your touring, your everything else is that far ahead that you're just existing in these three planes of kind of time. So to me, I always find that very interesting of how do you exist in any one space and how do you kind of navigate it?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that's a good point in terms of having repeat guests. Like for myself as a music fan coming up, I always enjoyed seeing interviews from different artists in their different eras, like maybe they have a different look or a different way about them or whatever. And so I think there's some value to be gleaned from that. And I would say like me filling in for Johnny era, definitely like chip on my shoulder, something to prove, treating it like this challenge that I was taking on. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to like do this, but also somewhat lightheartedly, just cause like I was the total outsider. I'd never heard of him or the band, was unfamiliar with this scene. And I was just like, jokes on everybody else. I'm just having a good time getting to tour and do this shit and trying to take it too much to heart. But yeah, I mean, as much as I felt like I was decently confident, it's like, it definitely pales in comparison to how I feel now. I don't feel so much like the new guy in the band because we're all kind of the new guys in this band. Like we were all founding members, like I'm such a huge part of the whole thing in terms of like the writing now, obviously, and getting to kind of share all that. So, I feel way more confident on stage, I'm sure, just because of all those things, and as much as, it's nice to get an opportunity to step into something, maybe for some artists, I think there was, because of the history of the band and the name and it did make sense for us to totally do something new. But I'm grateful that happened because I think it is always tough for people to be a replacement. Like you're just forever doomed to hear like, comparisons and right. I mean, it's not like you can't deal with it, but I think it's nicer to not have that, so.
Well, I think that's the hard thing is everyone always wants to compare something to something else, regardless if it's a new thing, you're comparing it to something that's old. And, like it sucks sort of like I almost feel like I'm getting to that age now, getting ready to turn 40 in about a month and a half, where it's this thing where at times, like sort of before recording the thing we were talking about, that person, when I heard their first song, I was like, oh, this just sounds like Avenged and it sounds like this and it sounds like this. And it's like, well, I'd rather just go listen to that. Like I'd rather listen to the source than to listen to someone that's doing a bad version of it or a watered down version. And to
Totally.
me, I feel like I hate that I kind of am getting to that age now, but it's like I also understand, and I've been kind of thinking about this a lot, where it's like, at 40, I was just reading an article about how like the people of my age range within a few years on either side were kind of in this weird anomaly where it's like we're still rooted in things that were pre-internet and like how our parents and grandparents kind of lived and were taught, but we're also have a foot in the new.
Right.
And I feel like, I constantly, like when I used to run a restaurant, like something I remember learning, working with college kids, going to U of M. And
Right.
it was a thing where I asked like this one kid, was like, hey, okay, I need you to do this. And they're like, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, well, it's part of your job. And they're like, no, fuck that. I'm not doing that. I don't make enough to do that. And I was like, and I just kind of was taken aback because I was like, what the fuck? And when I finally left that job, I just kind of started doing the same thing where I was like, I think the kids nowadays kind of, some people would say they're lazy. And I remember having this conversation with my uncle at a family gathering once. He's like, well, it just sounds like you're lazy. And I go, no, like if you're told, okay, if you do A, B, C, and D, X, Y, and Z are going to be your rewards. That's the thing you're going to get. And then they just telling you, keep doing these things, keep doing these things, keep doing these things. And then no one does. And you never get the reward. You never get the thing they keep saying you're going to get. I go, at what point do you go, you're a fucking liar and I'm not doing that anymore? Because all you've done is now that's the expectation out of me is I'm going to do all this work and I'm just
Right.
going to get the shit into the pay. But, and then the other side of it that I came to the conclusion of was I was like, when sorry, my wife just texted me something real quick.
That's okay.
But I was making the comment to my uncle. I was like, that's sorry. That it's a thing where I was like, your job wants all of these unrealistic expectations. Like they want you to give at least 2 weeks notice. They want you to train your replacement. They want you to do all this shit. And I go, but when they're done with you, what do? Did they give you 2 weeks? Do they give you a lot of time to let you know that you're not valuable to them anymore? No, they
Sure.
just fucking get rid of you. So at what point do you stop having that old school mentality of how to do something and then kind of approach it with a new way of thinking and change the behavior? And to me, I think that's kind of been a really interesting cross section for me is kind of getting to a point where you just see your non-negotiables, maybe where you're just like, I just watched the new season. So that's kind of a thing that's been on my mind of your non-negotiables, your non-starters. And I think a lot of people, aren't able to figure that out for themselves. They're not able to figure out internally, this is what I want. And moving forward, I'm going to set my boundaries. I'm going to, and this is more therapy talk stuff too, where it's like when you kind of start getting more tools and you start thinking about a lot of things from different perspectives, I think it allows you to make better informed decisions and know who you are, what you want, and how to go about it. And if you don't know some of those things, finding the people that do, add value and kind of cover your weaknesses so that you're better as a whole and you're more mostly strengths. And to me, I feel like that's something, looking at the band from an outsider's perspective, I feel like that's something that I feel like you guys have all kind of figured out together in a really long-winded way of getting to that.
Yeah.
Is that something that took a lot of time and a lot of communication between all of you to get there, or is that something that just kind of came naturally?
I mean, I think we always had, there's a chemistry in terms of musically, work wise, and then there's a chemistry personally. So like I would say like professional chemistry and like personal chemistry. You might have a group that works really well together musically because they're all session musicians that are just great players, but maybe they don't like to sit together on a bus or a van for 20 hours a day. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I think we always had decent chemistry amongst each other, but there's also like no substitute for time. And I think every album has been a slightly different approach to logistically. Like the first two, we kind of just locked ourselves. I mean, especially To Better Days. I think we had 40 days to write and record the whole record, basically from scratch. And happy with the product. Would I ever want to do it that way again? No. It's just so stressful. Like, especially for me, I think I'm just down to the wire trying to make sure that the lyrics are exactly how I want them to be. And I know that, I'm not going to be able to really change them once it's done. So, we kind of did the same formula for self-titled, but just, you know, maybe had 2 months instead. So it was a little bit longer, but I still was like fucking ready to blow my brains out, you know, because you're just so on the line. This last record was the first one we've done. We're really scheduled just specific writing time before recording, which was great because you still walk into a write and you're still like, I don't know what I'm going to say today. I have no idea. Maybe you think about something on the drive over, and then you still have that fun moment of like, we didn't have a song, now we have a song, like in a you know, maybe a few hours or something, and it's really exciting. But then you can sit on it and you can be like, do I want to change this? Do I want to do this? Instead of like, dude, I remember on the last record, you know, writing Dreams vocals like in the vocal booth. It was the last day we had with Eric Ron, and just like I was like, I have no idea if I actually like this or not. I hope that it's good because I have to cut it now. And it turned out okay, but it's like, yeah, if I can avoid doing that, like that's about boundaries. I'm like, please, let's only have writing and then recording separate. I think the mistake on this record that's forthcoming was just we booked that writing trip, and then it took a while to get in with Bronstein just for some scheduling conflicts for both of us. And so I think it was too much downtime. We had a big bunch of songs that, you know, it was easy for people to start kind of second guessing what we had done in that gap. And so I think, yeah, writing, maybe a month or so to kick some, you know, do we have the album? Do we need to write a couple more? Do we need to tweak some things and then go in and track? And then when you have that tracking experience, it's like, it can just be fun, you know, because it's like, for me personally, I really enjoy tracking. I have a blast. And I mean, even that, like we didn't have a lot of time with Dan, but I think I did like, like 10 songs in 9 days or something, like all leads, and like they're all full days, you know, of just tracking. I mean, I'm pretty fast. But you know, with all the harmonies and everything, but yeah, it can be taxing vocally too. Like that would suck if you're like, I'm all out of gas, you know. But so that was cool, but that's also a luxury that you're afforded, like once you get to a certain point, you know, like if you have a smaller budget, like you just have to work with what you have to work with, you know. So
well, I always think it's interesting that anything ever gets done from a musician's standpoint, because all I ever hear about is, like you were just saying, is that good? Oh, I could tweak this, and there's always tweaking, adding layers, changing something.
100%.
Oh, you know, actually I liked this version, or this you know, when you're getting your masters, I liked the third iteration of the mix on this version, just things like that. I always laugh when, like, you know, I was just, like I said, hanging out with Andrew a couple of days ago, and I was like, yo, is Mend ready? Like you said, you're going to send it to me. And he's like, well, we're actually going to somebody else to master it now, because like of how it is, it needs to be a certain way, and nothing against the guy that, you know, is doing it, but we just know that it could be better. And so I was like, well, send me what it is, because I'm interested to see what was quote unquote kind of the final mix before this other person gets a hold of it. Because I always like A and B and stuff like that, and just being like, oh, it was really cool how they like turned this part up or whatever. Because in this process of songwriting and even producing and mastering and mixing can greatly change how a song actually comes through.
100%.
And to me, I always find that's why I always think it's great when people either showcase, you know, the writing sessions like in a DVD or the making of, when you're kind of hearing like, oh, here is this thing. And then like you see someone go, hey, what if we did this? And then all of a sudden that thing becomes a chorus for another song. And then the wall they were against trying to make something work, just boom, the creativity makes it work. And it's like, oh, now that I'm not married to this one idea, it actually allows me to kind of look at something completely different. And again, kind of going back to, I think that's just an interesting thing of just how do people's brains work, because someone might go, oh, it's very linear. I go A, B, C, D, E, F, and whatever. And it might be, well, actually, no, if you take part C from this thing, now it actually completes this thing over here, and not being married to something. I think too often you see creative people kind of doing that. And once you get out of your own way, that's where like the real magic starts happening. And I think that happens in life too. Like when you get out of your own way, like everything all of a sudden just starts kind of working a lot easier because you're not forcing shit.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And it, again, you always have that fun creative spark in the moment, and then I'm just trying to avoid being like, okay, go do the final vocal now. I'm like, I don't even know if I like this. But yeah, dude, it's cool, and I hope the next record will be afforded, you know, even more resources to just make our best stuff. So, but I'm really really excited about how this record turned out. I think everybody's really happy. I would say sonically, like, people are saying we more effectively achieved what we were going for on self-titled, which is just kind of a tastier concoction of like the heavier rock stuff and the poppier side of things. I think it's just feels like a really natural blend, and I mean it should. I don't think that's just kind of where our tastes are, Um, I mean I don't listen to too much heavier music. Like there's a handful, like Bring Me's like still one of my favorite bands and stuff, and so there's some references, but a lot of the shit that I'm listening to is like, how did Max Martin make this melody so great, or like some of the just super pop stuff that I try to kind of infuse into our shit. So
I mean, it's funny. I get a lot of comments sometimes where they're like, I mean, like even like I'm wearing an Outcast shirt, and some people are like, I don't even think you like rock or heavy music, and I go,
oh,
I
funny.
I do, but the thing is you can't listen to that shit all the time. Like,
Oh, for sure.
sometimes to me, like, and it was really funny. I don't remember. Oh, I think it was like a Weekend song that came out a while ago. Blinding Lights, I think is what it was, and I was like,
Mhm.
why does this feel sort of like a slightly different take on Rod Stewart's Young Turks? And like I
Mm,
said that to someone, they're like, "Oh my god, I hear it!" Like the like that synthesizer piano line is kind of the
right.
melody line from Young Turks, and it was just like kind of funny to me because it's like I like music as a whole. So to me, it's like if something's like hooky and catchy, I'm all over it. And like if it's got something that's gonna bring me back, especially like now that we have really nice headphones, if you have a cool part or like there was like a band like blanking off the top of my head, but it's like they'll do like a panned part, and you're like, oh,
Okay.
that's so cool, like how it does that, or just weird little shit like that. To me, keeps bringing me back for decades or whatever. And there have been times where like I'll reference something like that, or like, if I get the record, I'll be like, oh, it's really weird because like what you're doing here kind of reminds me a little bit like, I was again, I think talking to Andrew, and I was like, Imogene Heap's like one of my favorite like
Mm,
artists. And he
nice.
was like, oh my God, for the new record, like that and the Frou Frou record are like very big influence. I was like, oh shit, okay. But it's
Sick. That's
like
awesome.
you look at a band like Idola and you're probably not thinking, okay, Imogene Heap
100%.
like is
Yeah,
going to be
for
an
sure.
influence, or like Bjork or something like that. But it's like
For sure.
when you start having a bigger kind of vocabulary of knowledge, of like information that you can pull from, it then kind of starts allowing you, I think, to kind of see some not obvious things. Like, and that was something too, like, kind of going into a little bit more of the upcoming tour you have with Dayseeker. I feel like a lot of the touring you're doing and a lot of the bands you're kind of getting paired with, it's really interesting because I would have said probably in the beginning of when you joined the band, I don't feel like the scene, quote unquote, had kind of expanded enough to kind of have enough bands where it's like we're heavy, we're poppy, we're kind of a
Yeah.
little bit of everything. And so
Right.
it always just kind of felt weird when you were on like some of these tours. You're like, you're either the lightest band on this tour or you're
100%.
the heaviest band on this tour.
100%.
And now I feel like you go out with these bands and it's like someone might like out prog you guys, or someone
Yeah.
might be out heavier than you, but there's a little bit of everything in all the bands that you're touring with. And I think it just is a really interesting space now to be in this new landscape of whatever the fuck you want to call it, from a
Right.
scene perspective or sound, that I think it's got to be fun and interesting. But something I have noticed, and you're the first person I've had on that I can ask this question directly,
Okay.
it seems to be that when because like, I was kind of alluding to, like, touring is kind of figured out way in advance if you can kind of get your ducks lined in a row. So I'm
Mhm.
assuming the Dayseeker tour was probably, you were getting pitched or offered the tour a while ago, maybe when writing this stuff. Was the song with Rory, was that a thing that kind of, because now it seems like every band does a song that you're going to kind of announce as the package tour. It's like Hailstorm
Mhm.
and I Prevail just did one. Like, a bunch of bands kind of
Right.
do stuff together now. How was that song pitched? And is that sort of a thing kind of behind the scenes of like, it'd be really great to announce this tour, a joint single?
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, so we were confirmed for the tour before that, and that was a song that just always had some open spots in it that we felt like could have, should have really benefited from having a feature. A lot of times I'll just finish a whole top line and then I'll be like, well, I don't want to get rid of what I have. This is good, But that one was really where I was like, that would be great to bring somebody on board and help fill in these gaps in the vocals. So, Rory was somebody that was high up on the list and kind of like maybe came first to mind. And then just the fact that we had the tour as well coming up just made a little too much sense. And we're like, if he could do it, maybe we could play it live together, maybe whatever. And it just worked out and it was great. And yeah, a cool thing about that experience too was, for that outro, we'd messed around with maybe Rory doing some, just kind of more like scream, like harsh vocals, with me. And then, he was actually the one that was like, I want to be a little more like protective over your guys' sound. And I know that's not really something you do. So then we landed on him and I just trading back and forth, just like gritty, clean vocals. So which I thought was really cool, like for him to care enough to do that. Cause I do think that's part of our sound too. Like, for somebody like my mom, for example, like you could put on some pretty heavy rock music and she'd be like, this is cool. And then the minute that somebody comes on the mic that sounds like a orc from Lord of the Rings or something, she's just like out, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I don't know. I think it kind of goes back to that thing of like you were saying, it's like, I don't want to listen to something that's just like a worse copy of something else. And so I always try to find, at least pockets for us where it's like, what other band could be doing this? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like what other band is doing this in one song or whatever. And so I think part of our brand is hopefully a little bit of that accessibility with the cleans, and Rory fits perfect in that. You know what I mean? So he really elevated the song, and almost like from like a producer standpoint, it's like bringing in that voice. It's like you immediately recognize him, and it's the same as like using like a classic drum sound or like a classic synth sound or something on a record. So, yeah, that was really cool. And it's our first feature we ever did. And,
that was going to be my next question is, how did you find trying to work with somebody else from a vocal perspective, since that's not anything that you've done since you've been in the band?
I mean, it was great. I think, I think he probably set the bar really high in terms of how the experience went, because he's a great singer and he's really easy to work with and wrote a great verse, and it was all just there, I like to think that's how I am to work with too, like he's very professional and very on his shit, and it's great. So we'll see. Maybe we'll try out another one and I'll be like, I'm never doing it again. Like, it was terrible. Features are garbage. But so far so great, so.
Well, I think it always makes, when it happens, it always makes it really interesting, because that was the first thing I remember when getting that email blast about that song, and I was like, really, they have a feature? Like, they haven't done that. And that would, like, it kind of made it more important to me. Like, it's like it wasn't done just for the sake of doing it, but it's a thing where it's like, oh, okay, like, this is interesting. But then it almost becomes this thing, and again, sort of speaking to my age, where I almost start going down the rabbit hole in my head where I'm like, this would be really cool if it becomes like a Queens of the Stone Age thing with like Mark Lanigan, where it's like he's kind of our perpetual guest feature, on that every record moving forward. He's going to do at least a song with us, or this person's going to do a thing, and it kind of becomes this like, not an expectation necessarily, but just like a continuation of like, we do this thing, and now forevermore we always will try to do this one feature and this one person, and it kind of is like, you're an honorary member of our band moving forward because of just how well this did or whatever, and how easy it was to work with you.
Sure. I mean, I would obviously love to work with Rory again. It'd be great. So we'll see what happens.
Something else I had kind of asked you initially in our first chat that I kind of wanted to know if there's ever, now that you have more, I would say, more free reign to kind of be more in the creative writing process with the band.
100%.
Is there, because you had kind of talked about maybe still wanting to do some solo stuff that you wouldn't be able to do in Rain City. Is that still a thing that you feel, or now that you're more actively involved in the songwriting, do you feel like that's kind of been curbed?
No, I always want to do more solo stuff. I always want to do side projects. I just want to do as much as I can. I think my kind of plague is like, even if Rain City Drive was the biggest rock band in the world and I, had $300 million in the bank, I'd still be like, yeah, but my solo stuff, I'm just fucking out. I haven't put out a song, like I want all cylinders firing at all times, ideally. And that's like my dream anyways. I mean, I'm not going to be heartbroken, but I would love to just be able to share like all the styles of music that I like, and then I feel like I can do at a high level. And as much as Rain City Drive is, I would say, covers the most ground for me creatively, just because I get to do so many different things. Versus like my solo music would be way more limited, right? It would be more like singer-songwriter, acoustic, which we have elements of that and times that we do that in Rain City already. But the band isn't for everybody, and I can't go as hard in that pop singer-songwriter lane as I would like to at times. So yeah, I think it still makes sense. And I mean, I've been definitely a primary writer, super involved since To Better Days, and it's been great. But I also write for a lot of other artists too, and I'm just always trying to stay busy. And the band remains my first priority, but yeah, I just think there's too many hours in the day to not try to get in some other stuff.
Well, and that was sort of a talking point this past weekend with Andrew, was because obviously DGD is his thing. Idol is
Yeah,
like his project. That was the band he started. So
right.
obviously it's been great to see that band kind of taking the steps that it has in the last couple of years of growing.
Hmm.
But it's a thing where even still talking to him, he's like, oh, there's other stuff I want to do beyond even these things. And it's just like,
Right.
something we've kind of discussed is, how do you navigate being creatively fulfilled in life in general, but
Hmm.
not burning yourself out because you're trying to do too much and you're obviously slipping or lacking in some part of your life. How have you navigated that? Because it seems like you're very much wired the same way I am, where it's like you go, 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 and your brain's just always like thinking about another thing you can be doing. How do you
Yeah.
compartmentalize your creativity and kind of balancing it out with the rest of your life?
I mean, I think for me, it's honestly helpful to do like a variety of things. So
Mm.
like if I step away from Rain and I do like a side project thing or just a write that's like a totally different sound, it's like I still get to work on my craft and work on music, but it's in a way that's refreshing. You know what I mean? And I feel like it helps keep me energized. There's like the rare time where like if I just got home from a tour, or we just finished tracking a record or whatever, and I feel like, all right, it's time to have a well-deserved break. But if I'm off for like 48 hours, I start being like, I'm a piece of shit that's never done anything. I can't remember the last time. You know what I mean? Like, and it's
Yeah.
not true. It's like, no, you're having a couple of days off. You just did a lot. But yeah, man, I don't know. I just want to do as much as I can. So we'll see. You just got to try to fit it all in, and it does require discipline though, because I mean it's great with the band. There's 4 other guys in it and a whole big team and everything that keeps me on the ball pretty easily, and just there's always a group chat going off, and I'm always trying to figure out album art and whatever, all this stuff, set list for the tour and whatever. And the only time I have to do anything else would just be the time where we're all on break, and it takes that extra step to be like, nope, I'm not gonna have a day off. I'm gonna choose to be at work at something else. So
I think that's something I'm struggling with right now, because
Mhm.
in about just under a month, I got to have foot surgery that's going to have me down for at least 2 months,
Oh, okay.
like to where I can't walk on it, like no
Wow.
weight bearing. And I realize, like, it's really made me realize how bad I am with downtime, like not being
Hmm.
able to do something. Because I like immediately I was like, oh, now I can schedule the thing like the dumpster to show up and I can clean out my garage. And I was like, no, asshole, no, you can't. And then it was like, oh, I could go do this. And I'm like, no, I can't. And it's like, oh, I could go do this. And I'm like, well, I can't even drive myself. So no, I can't. And then it's like, I realized that it's like all I can really do in this time is like I can watch TV, I can play video games, I can read a book. What I'm going to try to do, because I will literally have open availabilities, be like, let's do as many of these as possible.
Oh,
because,
for sure. Yeah.
Because otherwise I already can tell right now, like it's not even happening for a month, but I'm already stressing, being like, the fuck am I going to do for 2 months not being able to do anything? Like,
right.
I'm not conditioned to do nothing. And it's already stressing me out of being like I downloaded a video game. I started playing it already. And I'm like, well, this was supposed to be for like a month from now when I had nothing to do. And then I was like, I'm already playing it. Like, just like little things like that. And then it's like, I started to be like, oh, I'll save some work for myself. But it's like, I'm awful at saving work. Like, I'm so far ahead of my job right now that like today, right before I left, I was like, oh, there's 2 jobs. So like I make inks and pick the jobs for a screen printing company. So I was like, ooh, 2 new jobs just came in. And I was like, oh, I should save them. So I was like, I'll just get ahead for tomorrow and I'll write out everything I need to pick, like in, numerical order. And then I was just like, well, I got like 10 minutes. I can pick it real quick. And then I picked it all and I was like, well, fuck, now I got nothing to do tomorrow morning until something else potentially drops in my lap. And I was like, I am not good. Like, even in that situation, most people in the last 10 minutes of the day be like, I'm done. I'm cruising to the end of the day. Who cares? And I was like, oh, I could do this. I could get this done real quick. And I just realized, like, in general, I'm not good with like downtime or not being quote unquote productive in some way, shape, or form. And so to me, when I kind of identify that same trait in others, I'm always like, how do you navigate it? Because right now I'm facing downtime for the first time, really like significant time like that. And it's like, this sucks. I am not looking forward to it. And it's like, I always kind of question those that are like, oh, 2 months off, this will be great. And I'm like, who are you? Are you that lazy that you just want 2 months to do nothing?
Yeah, because like I said, if in the times where I am wishing for it, it's like it's very short-lived, and then I'll be like, this is bad. So I don't know. I think there's an ebb and flow, and I think that taking more of like a zoomed out view of things is helpful. Where it's like it's going to be 2 months, it's going to be long, but also, in the scope of a year, in the scope of 5 years, it's not really going to matter at all, and it's pretty easy to like counterbalance that. And I think there is probably a unique opportunity to be had there. This is the same as people found, like, during lockdown and COVID and everything. It's like, well, I did this, or I spent more time with my kids, or I did, like there's something that maybe you could capitalize on,
Yeah, unfortunately, not being able to be very mobile makes a lot of the. It's like I said, I was like, oh, I could do all these things. I was like, no, you can't. And then it's like the hard part of being
strong at like seated overhead press or something.
Well, that was the first thing when I saw Andrew. I was like, I texted him beforehand. I was like, hey, can you put together a very minimal like upper body workout thing for me, because I can't have weight on my foot? And he was like, oh, I'd love to. And I was like, okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
He's like, resistance bands are going to be your favorite, your new friends. And I was like, okay, I got those.
Yeah.
So I'm at least like I said, I'm trying to go into it as much as like I would do anything where I feel like it's over preparing. But I feel like at least when you go into something with a mindset of this is what I want out of this thing, then I feel like you're at least more prepared mentally, emotionally, and everything else. So I feel like, and that was the thing sort of that a few people have kind of touched on, where they're just like, because like I'm really terrified of this thing, because like Achilles and like foot things and like horror movies and shit are always like my worst fears. Ooh. So it's like something happening to my foot, I'm like, oh god, this is like the worst thing ever that could happen to me. Right. So I'm already kind of freaking out about that, but I'm trying to be more like you said, positive mindset. What are some positives that I can get out of this? What are the good things? But it's kind of hard to balance it, where it's like you're not overprepared or not overthinking in one way or another, and then going to be disappointed because you didn't get to do those things, or those things didn't manifest the way you want to. And I feel like, talking to people like yourself that are in that situation where it's like, wait, I really hope we get this tour. I really hope we get to do this, or we get to do these things, and then things fall through. It's like, oh, fuck. And it's like not letting that bummed outedness, which is not a word, affect you for too long. I think that's the thing that I try to focus on more now as I get older, is just how do you feel the thing but not let it overtake you.
I mean, yeah, I always let myself feel the thing. I think that's the best part, regardless of whether it happens or not. It's cool to even just get the opportunity
Hmm.
to be in the running or whatever. Oh, we might get this thing, and it's just that's always going to be the best part, because I find even when you get the thing, then you take it for granted and it becomes normal or whatever. But it's that first thing of like, we might be opening for blah blah blah, or it's like, just I think that's cool. You know, it's just cool to feel that and get excited about it and put it out there. And I never seem to get too disappointed if it doesn't work out, because I just know that we're close,
Right.
you know? And kind of going back to what we said earlier, it's like shit happens so far in advance, and like everybody else is always the last to know. So I remember specifically on the To Better Days record, I knew I was going to do a good job because I know myself, and I knew that it was going to work out. And once we had the album in the can, I knew people were going to like it and whatever. And it was funny to see the reaction of, like, we posted the first song, like, this is pretty good, but blah, blah, blah. And then the second song, like, well, this song's pretty cool too, but blah, blah. And then by the end, and you slowly, and like, I'm already, a year ahead, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
but even Jimmy, who was our producer for the record, and, he had done Heavier with us. And that's kind of how he landed the album. And I remember him telling me at the end of the album, he was like, yeah, you like really impressed me on this record. I didn't, and I was like, you, Jimmy, like we did that song together. You didn't know I was going to pull it up, so that really, taught me something. And so it's just, you always got to kind of, it's this weird, like, just kind of doling out little spoonfuls, and nobody really knows what's going on behind the scenes, and you just got to try to stay active. And it'll be interesting to see. But I think people are gonna like this record. So
I always just think it's funny, even you're saying that people sort of, I don't want to put words in your mouth where you're saying like people doubt either what you can do or what essentially.
100%.
But it's interesting to hear you say that, because to me, I feel like, and again, kind of using a therapy term, but like, I feel like doing this show has really kind of brought out sort of the imposter syndrome at times for me, because, I'm not like some of the other podcasters where it's like, oh, you know me from this band that either still tours,
Right.
used to tour, or something. Like, I'm pretty much DIY. No one knows really my story, where I came from, or anything like that. It's just, I started booking shows, kind of befriended different people, and then eventually landed on doing this through connections that I've made, and then friendships and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, I was telling, actually, in the chat that we do with Andrew, or that I do with Andrew, I should say, toward the end, like, he really broke down the finances of touring in a band like the size of DGD. And he's like, it costs this, and this is how much, like, recording costs, and da 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 da.
Right.
And I was like, I love that we just had this conversation for like 35 minutes on this, because this is a part of the side of things that I find fascinating, that this is how I know these things. Unfortunately, most people don't know that I'm having these conversations with people of this stature and that know what they're talking about. So when I talk about something to you or whomever, it becomes this thing, oh, listen, this kid talking out of his ass. Like, how the fuck does he know? And it's like, just because you don't hear it on this doesn't mean I'm not having these conversations about, first week numbers, DSPs, all the things associated with making records or whatever, the industry. But I think the more we start talking about it, just like mental health and a lot of other things, I think it just becomes, when you have more transparency, I think it allows for people to understand now more why things are happening. Like, I was a big stickler on, and still kind of am, I hate the like 6-month rollout. Here's half the record. I kind of hate it. It's like, at that point, just drop singles. Like, you probably already recorded all those things at that same time, so it's going to have that continuity anyway.
Yeah.
But just drop a single and just tour the whole time, and kind of make that the new norm, like the new model. Like, I kind of don't like the idea of, we got a record, it comes out in December, pre-save the first song, and I hope everything we do leading up to that really keeps you engaged for the next 6 months, while we're waiting for the vinyl to be manufactured and sent out to us and all that kind of stuff. To me, it it kind of has lost its allure of, you know, and famously, I always say, like, I remember when Deftones came out with Rocket Skates before Diamond Eyes came out.
Okay.
And I was like, and you know, they put out a 10-second clip of just the riff, and you're like, oh, what the fuck is that? And then it's like the single comes out in like 2 weeks, the record comes out in a month or two from now, and that's all you had.
Right.
You had one song, maybe the actual lead off single, if the promotional single
Right.
wasn't the lead off single, but that was it. And I feel like, unfortunately, bands, artists, whatever, kind of would put out an inferior product, knowing that they could front load the singles or whatever on a record, and so people would need to buying everything before you had the ability to buy singles and stuff. That I feel
Right.
like people were burned too often, spending 20 some odd dollars on a CD or an iTunes album, and you're like, dude, most of this record sucks,
Right.
and you're stuck
Well,
with your purchases.
There's just such an incentive now to do singles because of streaming, where it's like
Right.
every song gets like here's the new song, and it goes out to release radar and everything. That yeah, I think I
I'm
mean,
sorry to cut you off, but just to make a point, the thing I learned very recently about that makes that make a lot more sense, though, to me, is I always thought, what's the point of doing all that if you're generating all these numbers for these singles, but then you put out a record, and then someone told me that actually all those singles then get put into the DSP of the whole album, so therefore you've already kind of started. And I was like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. I understand that now. But before, when I was like, well, who gives a shit if you have 10 million streams on this one song? Then you're dropping the record, and now you're starting all over again, essentially.
right, it's going to count towards first
Yeah.
week sales, I guess, or like certainly for you know, certification, like if you know, what is it? So it would be
Oh, I don't know. It seems like they keep changing the numbers.
150 million. So it's 150 on-demand streams equals one sale.
Yeah.
So in the US, you know, a platinum record is 1 million sales, and gold is half at 500K. So like to go platinum on Spotify, just like, let's say just Spotify streams, which usually people have more than that, right? But if it has 150 million would be platinum, and 75 is gold, right? But so if somebody, like some of these big artists do, like if you were to put out a song that had 1.5 billion streams and you slap that on an album, the whole album is platinum. Just, you know what I mean? Which is sick.
Yeah.
So, but it is interesting. I mean, we were having combos internally about long form versus short form content. Like whether it's worth it doing full music videos or not anymore. And I think the thing that I like potentially about, which is a good point that Felipe made, was just like there seems to have a little more staying power in the music video. That's like maybe it lives on YouTube forever, and it's like indicative of like this was this era that we were in. And that's also what I like about kind of repackaging all those singles as an album. It's like this is this era where we looked like this and sounded like this and blah blah blah, and people can kind of reconnect and revisit. You know, sometimes people wipe their socials and whatever, and like you kind of lose those short form things. But you know, it definitely, there is that, and same as there's a incentive to push more for singles, there's also an incentive to push more for short form, because you can, you know, spend, you know, like a tenth or something of the budget that you would on a full music video. You can get 5 to 10 clips out of it, and it'll reach like way more people, and it's fed through the algorithm instead of having to manually like click on a link or whatever. So it is interesting. And I think there's a lot of that like inherited mindset of like, well, we do music videos. It's like, well, why do we do music videos? It's like, well, we do music videos because MTV is a big deal, and instead of breaking bands on the radio, they're playing it on TV, and we need a video. And if we have a really cool, flashy video, even if the song's not that great, people will be interested in the song and they'll buy it. But that's not happening anymore. So it's like, what are we doing it for? You know what I mean? And you just, and there might be a great reason, but you should ask yourself. And the same way, it's like, well, we got to make a full album, because then when people go buy the CDs, like, oh, people aren't really buying CDs anymore, and we just put them all out of single. You know what I mean? It's like you gotta think about it. I do think people buy vinyls now, which is cool. People do buy CDs at merch, but like you got to kind of crunch the numbers, and I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of like, well, let's actually sit down and do the math instead of just being like, this is what we do. You know, like look at like I guess Falling is finally doing an album now, but like,
oh, are they?
Put the whole the album budget into each song and video shit like really worked for them,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's been another big talking point between Andrew and I, of just like people kind of bucking the traditional system. And it's like, I think the whole music industry has kind of looked at what Falling, or I should say Ronnie, because it's really Ronnie,
totally.
what he has done, because it's like, what's the point of putting out an album if, and I think everyone's been talking about this, where it's like, okay, we spent all this fucking time and money on 12 songs, put out videos for, we had to figure out what are our quote unquote best. What are we leading with? What are we spending the money on to push to radio or Octane or playlists or, our marketing budget and all that kind of stuff. But then essentially you're saying whatever it is left, you're like, here's kind of what's left. And that it's probably never going to get played live unless for some reason it becomes a hit or the streaming numbers do well with it. But it's like, it almost seems like you're wasting money then at that point to not really service the other songs that you put in all the time and effort into. And then you see someone like Ronnie and what Falling in Reverse is doing, like you're saying, where it's like, we're going to go balls out one song. We're going to blow up this one song over the next 3-4 months.
Right.
And to me, it's like, when you see that done, you're like, well, shit, that kind of makes a lot more sense, because focus on one song, make it be the best that it can be. And then that's all you're focused on now for the next 3 to 4 months. And it's not even like, leading up to, and I didn't know that they were putting out a record, but it's like, do that. And it seems like that's been working really great. I don't know if it can work for everybody.
Right.
But again, I think the conversation is interesting of being like, all right, what is he doing? Why is this working? And I think, even like Bring Me, to kind of bring them back up, we're sort of doing the same thing. And to kind of take it a step further, there was one group, Chino and Crosses. They did something that I thought was really fucking interesting. And I thought it was going to be more of where the industry was going based on the long rollouts and singles and so forth, where they put out one EP and it was like 4 or 5 songs. And then a few months went on, they put out another one. And then a few more months went on and they put out another one. But when they announced the third one, hey, by the way, this is actually the full length. And the full length is not in the order that it's not these 3 albums or songs in the same order. They're in a different order. So now you get to hear this album in a completely different way than you've already experienced it. So it gives it new life in a completely different capacity than I really had seen anyone do. And I kind of figured that was going to be more of how this long form rollout thing would be, where it's like, here's an EP, here's an EP, here's an EP. Oh, by the way, this is a whole record. And either you could have bought it individually along the way, or now you can buy it as the one whole unit. And to me, I thought that was so interesting and kind of supports the idea of how do you break a record up into these pieces that make sense, but then know that it's going to fit in a different way and make a different type of record when you put it all together. And I think that's just interesting, to take the same content and repurpose it a few different ways and kind of keep people engaged and interested. So I really expected that to be a thing. But something else too, and I wonder if you guys, kind of talking about how you are looking at these things and what other people are doing. So I went to go see Ice Nine and Motionless a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And, like,
I'm still listening. I'm just gonna put my I'm gonna grab my liner. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no worries. So something that was, I mean, I've seen those bands enough over the years, and some of them are not really my bag, but it becomes this thing where, at the time I was working with a friend's band and kind of more behind the scenes capacity. Okay. And something that I just kind of started watching as I was looking at these giant productions that they had, reinvested their time and money into over the years. And I kept thinking to myself, what makes these bands? What is it about them that makes people come to them, know all the songs, spend money and time, and be interested in this, invested in this, versus just a local band? And something I kind of latched onto was, as soon as they go on, the show's starting. There's something that it signifies, hey, this show is about to begin. Right. And from the rest of the set, it is a show that has things kind of like, here's our breaks, here's what leads into the next thing. It is a full-on show. The other thing I really latched onto was they repurposed a lot of their content. So the music videos that they had made, they're now playing behind them. So parts that are kind of behind them. The use of branding, so like constantly flashing the different iterations of their band logo or whatever, or the parts of a song are like playing behind so you can follow along. And it's like, oh, these are ways to repurpose your content you've already paid for and people already know and have seen and now
Right.
incorporated into your live thing. Is that something you guys are kind of thinking about as well when you're making like music videos or something, of like, can we repurpose this or repackage this some other way to make it worth the investment?
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I think it's it does come down to like a budget thing too, you know, where I think this headliner that we have coming up, it's like our first time being like, we're going to get a lighting package, we're going to do whatever, you know, and so some of those opportunities just really aren't there for us yet at this stage. But I think that's a great point where it's like, you know, if you're investing in this visual and if it would also make a great video wall for live or whatever, it's like, yeah, that's like a way easier sell. I was thinking too as well in terms of bands that are just starting out. I think there's more of an incentive to do a full length effort just so you have enough material to do a full set, right? But kind of as you continue your career, it's almost like the inverse is true, where you have a big discography that you're known for. It's like, well, we have to play this song. Well, we have to play this song. I mean, even enacted our level, it's like, well, we got to play Talk to a Friend. Well, we got to play Blood Runs Cold. Well, we got to play Medicate Me Now. Well, we got to play whatever. And then, you know, if we're going to do, let's say like a 1 or 2 slot on a bigger tour, it's like, that's our set. It's just the hits. And, you know, I think of a band like Maroon 5 or something. It's like, think about how many songs that they have to put. It's like, well, we got to play Moves Like Jagger. We got to play This Love. We got to play Sugar. We got to play blah, blah, blah. It's like, and then you're going to make a whole new album that hopefully has like one more of the like, okay, we just added a Girls Like You or something to our hit Rolodex or roster or whatever, you know? But then it's like that whole rest of that album, it's like, yeah, you hope the fan, but it's like how much investment or how much return on your investment you're getting. And also at that point, you already have all like the big radio contacts and everything where it's like you could just be using all that budget just to like, we need another Moves Like Jagger, we need another whatever, you know? So I don't know, it is interesting. But then there's like the artistic side of it. I think if people really have like, they're like, I have something to say and it's an album format, you know, great. And there's all different ways to break, right? Like there's bands that break just because they're really critically acclaimed. Maybe they have this record that people like, got to check out this record, you know? I'm a big fan of, like I said, of having things on an album just so that there's not just like lost songs kind of floating around. Like if it's not in the top 5 on Spotify, it's like people just won't hear it potentially. But it is interesting. You got to really kind of look at the landscape and look at how people actually consume music these days, you know? And I think it'll just be interesting to see. I think things will slowly shift in one direction or another, you know? But I think there will be acts like Falling that, you know, capitalize on the way things are, and maybe somebody hasn't really realized, you know, and they're like, oh yeah, that really does work, doesn't it? You know.
It's funny.
Also, another thing I've been thinking about is how music in general is so much more evergreen than it used to be, just because of streaming. So there's no guarantee that people will listen to, you know, your music forever. But if they do, even if the streams are smaller, it's like you're looking at hopefully like a, you know, 30, 40, 50 years of payout, you know what I mean, on your catalog. And that kind of makes you think too, in terms of like a lot of bands that I would think, I don't want to call anybody out or like artists, but that maybe were more of like a one-hit wonder. Like you'll go to their page and they still have like, you know, 10 plus million monthlies or whatever. And it's like, and it's that song at the top, but maybe it has like 2 billion streams, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of not going anywhere versus I think there was a more of a urgency and a push to really keep evolving and really keep like, we got to come up with the new shit and the new album, the new whatever back in the day. Cause like, well, everybody already bought that CD and maybe some of them got scratched or broken and they had to buy another one. But like for the most part, all the money's in. And like, if you don't reinvent the wheel here and give us like a whole new Michael Jackson or a whole new whatever, like we're kind of fucked, you know? Like,
yeah.
And that just doesn't exist anymore. Like I really think you could make a career because of streaming. Like if you just had one fucking great album, like, or two, like you're kind of good in theory, you know, or one or two great songs, you know, like it's just going to continually generate revenue, and like you can kind of stay in that world instead of being like, now I'm in my bad boy era, now I'm in my this era, now I'm at, you know, and like we got to sell more of these little pieces of plastic, you know. So
Well, it's funny because like I had Miles from Fastball on a little while ago, and what was interesting is, you know, I was talking because that band has really been interesting to me when I look back on it, because, you know, everyone just assumes they're a one-hit wonder. I would say, quote unquote, they're a 2.5 hit wonder. Um,
hell yeah.
but like something that, you know, I have been saying for a long time, so it was really interesting actually getting to talk to Miles about it, is I was like, you know, they put out a song Out of My Head. And I remember when it came out, you know, it got radio airplay because the other two singles had done pretty well. Nothing as big as The Way, but it was a thing where at that point it was kind of considered a failure. It didn't reach this crossover appeal as The Way did, and wasn't, you know, the video wasn't played on MTV, you know, all this kind of shit. And I remember sitting and this actually goes right back to what I was saying about it's interesting listening to all kinds of music. So when something comes up somewhere else, you're like, wait, I recognize that. And I guess it was MGK that sampled that chorus melody for a song of his with some other chick. I don't remember doing the vocal harmony for the melody or for the chorus.
Oh, sick.
And I was like, how did that happen? He goes, they literally hit us up. They asked if they could use it. We're like, and they're like, we don't need you to do anything. Just, you know, sign off if you're cool with it. And then like, it was available like a day later. Like, so he was like, either if we didn't say yes, they probably had something that sounded similar enough that they could use and just go. But was the thing where he was talking about, you know, getting that mailbox money, where it's like, that thing made us a lot of money and we didn't have to do anything for it. But it's interesting to me to think about how we're at a point because of streaming, and I hate to say it like this, where there's no original idea, but I actually think it's the opposite, where I think someone can hear something else in a melody or a chorus or a line or something and go, oh, if I repurpose this would be really cool for this. And in that regard, I think it's really interesting to see where people are pulling influences from, but to see that something wasn't a quote unquote success, and then 20, 30 years later, it's a part of something that is massive. And it's like, you have 100%. No fucking idea, man. Like 100%. Billy Squire, for the most part, for as much as everyone's like, oh, The Stroke. Okay, sure. That is his one hit, quote unquote. But that dude is like the most sampled person in, like, I think pop and hip hop, like hands down. Like he has so many things that have been sampled that it's like he has a whole probably other career on the back end side of things that people aren't even aware of. And I just think it's interesting to see how people navigate that, because I think even now you're starting to see a lot more people, and this will be kind of an interesting last question to kind of start wrapping up on. You're starting to also see people re-record old releases, because either the sunset clauses are up or, you know, whatever, the labels went defunct and now they can get back
Taylor,
either a part of the royalties or, you know, whatever, and they own it now. The question I would have, and you don't have to get into too many specifics, but I just wonder, because again, you're one of the first that's kind of in this newer era where maybe this is a thing, but with the new name, when you guys decided to probably do a new LLC and all that kind of stuff for Rain City Drive, were you able to restructure your contract? And if so, has the verbiage changed to deal with how long masters, royalties, whatever, streamings and all that, and streaming included in that? Because that's been a big point of contention for a lot of these older artists locked into their old deals, where they're like, well, when we signed to this long, you know, 6-7 album deal, whatever, it was CDs. Streaming wasn't even a thing. Sync opportunities were aplenty. Now they're not maybe as aplenty as, like, you know, the video games getting licensing deals, whatever. So now is the verbiage and terminology actually getting updated in these contracts to reflect streaming and so forth, and to kind of be more in line with how they would have maybe been back in the day of, you know, CD and tangible physical media? Is that a thing that you guys were able to traverse, or is that something that's still kind of outdated with the language?
So, I mean, luckily for us, like, we've always had really short deals. And so, yeah, like, when, you know, we went to Thriller for self-titled because the deal was already up. Like, we had like a one album, you know, so it's and we still have a good relationship with the old label and everything's good. I believe the terms would remain the same, even though, like, we started the new band, but it's not anything like bad, you know? So
Okay.
everything's been cool. Like I think any opportunities that come our way, like everybody's on board, and it like hasn't been a problem. But yeah, again, I think that the main thing is like we're not really roped into any long standing deals, which is good. So we like to try to do that, you know.
Well, I just like I said, it's really interesting because I remember like Josto a while ago. For the longest time, his whole thing was, um, streaming sucks, Spotify sucks, the artists get fucked. Basically the same rhetoric everyone says. And then the interesting thing is he put out like a solo record where he owned
Okay.
all of it. And then
Right.
all of a sudden his whole tune changed. He was like, well, actually the numbers are pretty fucking good and you get paid pretty decently if
If you actually own the shit. And like
if you own the shit. And that
and
was
like
kind of, yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say like, let's say like again, if it does well and it can continue to do well over the years, like could Spotify pay out artists more? Of course, but it's like even at the rate that they do, over a 30-year, because people also are in the business of like selling masters, and that's like a thing. Like even you can sell you basically get like an advance on your royalties, and that's something we've
Yep.
considered. But it's like, if the band continues to do well, it's like those numbers just kind of increase in theory, and then it's like, that you could, if the band was popular for long enough, it's like your kids inherit those royalties or whatever, like it like becomes more of an asset, something of value to own, which again, it's like, yeah, it's more advantageous or catered to quote unquote one hit wonders or whatever, because it's like there's not a need to sell anything new, because you're never going to not be selling it. Anytime somebody wants to listen to it, they are paying for it. So
Right.
it's like you can stay in theory in the same genre, in the same era, in the same whatever, and if that song is like an evergreen song, like you're kind of, and also like, yeah, I think I've always said like, oh dude, if I could be a one hit wonder, like great, because like at least I have a fucking hit, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that would be way better than nothing, and of course, but it's also like, you could argue people are like a one career wonder, or one, like the ride has to end at some point, and it's just like, how do you quantify that? Or like you were talking about earlier with the you said it was fastball, right? That like
Yeah.
the release was kind of considered a fit, but like only because it didn't live up to the last thing. That's like, it could still be good, like it could still like Radiohead's one of my favorite bands. It's funny to see like Creep is still their top song, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
that's just, and they've made a career from themselves, kind of like separate from that and adjacent to it, but it's still there, and they're still making money on it or whatever. And it's yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know, it's like kind of ever changing landscape, but it's not the worst thing. And I kind of look up to artists like that instead of falling for the trap of the label, I'm sure the second album, like, we need another Creep, we need another grungy angst. Like, no, we're gonna give you the Bends, and you're gonna think it's okay, and then we're gonna give you OK Computer. We're gonna be the biggest rock band on the planet, because people are like, oh my god, there's like the new Pink Floyd, right? So not the target. And that's,
Yeah.
again, that's another reason why I'm in favor of like expanding on the vision of the band or whatever, because for the longest time, like, Talk to a Friend, and again, if Talk to a Friend was the biggest song we ever do and just continues to grow, like, great, we're competing with ourselves at this point. I love that song, really proud of it, like, still some of the best writing I've done. I'm like happy with it, but to see what Medicate Me's done is really good, more from a creative standpoint. So it's like, I feel like going into the next record, hopefully it'll be the first time that I'm not hearing like, we need some more like mental health, like self-help, whatever. We need another Talk to a Friend, which is fine. But also, like, I don't feel like I can write that song better than I did
Again.
the first time. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like we got it, and then, but so like Medicate Me, like, I can't wait to hear it's like, we need another kind of sexy, dark pop, heavy break. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let's, and maybe by that point we'll be on the next thing already, but at least let's keep changing the target. You know what I mean? So,
Well, I think that's always been the thing for me, and why some of the like, it's funny you mentioned Maroon 5 earlier because like I've been going back and listening to what is it, Songs About Jane.
Yeah, it's great.
Fucking great record. I mean, they don't sound like that at all anymore.
But
And
and that's like a real, like, they fucking wrote that shit in the
yeah.
studio. You know what I mean? Like it's really good.
But it's funny because like now I look back on music that I quote unquote hated when I was younger or like when it first came out. Like a big one that I hated for the longest time was Matchbox 20. And then in the last probably 10, 12 years, I've just fallen madly in love with Matchbox 20. And I'm like, this is some great fucking songwriting. Just songwriting, the way it's written, the way it's produced,
100%.
everything about it is fucking great. Then I went and saw it and smoked a bunch of weed and watched them play like out at a shed couple of years ago, and I was like, this is so fun.
Dude, yeah.
And I was like, adult contemporary is apparently my shit now.
Kyle from Matchbox, really cool. I've worked with him in Nashville. He's helped me out on one of my solo records and shit. But yeah, it's just, and I think even you see it with like the little resurgence that like Creed's having now, whatever, like these bands that people kind of love to troll.
Yeah.
But you get to a point where like, yeah, but they do have some fucking smash hits, don't they? And I think that's kind of where I'm at with Imagine Dragons now. I feel like they get a lot of hate just for being so big, and there's certain people that I'm kind of surprised that feel as passionately about them in a negative way as they do, just because I'm like, my test is always like, if I were to play you one of their songs and I was just like, oh yeah, this is like my cousin's band, he lives in Seattle, like he's like really trying to get something going, but they haven't been having much luck or whatever, and then like I played you like any of their songs, you'd probably be like, this is great, tell them to keep going, tell them to, but just because it's so big and then it's supposed to be like the best song ever, it's supposed to be like numerically better or something, then right. And it's like, then people just hate it automatically. But anyways, I think that maybe 20 years from now or something, they would have a era where people are like, Imagine Dragons has some fucking bangers.
Well, that's like, it's funny. I remember when they came, whatever their like big first single was. I just remember thinking like my biggest takeaway, and it's such a nerdy thing where I was just like, is this one of the first like big like hits like this? Like it's a quote unquote pop hit. That's a quote unquote band, but has nothing more than just rhythm instruments. Like I don't even think there's like guitar or bass on it. Like no strings. It's all like percussive.
For sure.
And then like when I said that to someone, they're like, no, and I go, no, listen, like there's no, from what I could tell listening, I was like, there's no guitar, there's no obvious bass. It's just drums or like program drums or like keys, but there's no like traditional band instruments on this. And I was like, that's weird to me. Like that a hit that doesn't have any of that stuff that usually is where your melodies come from. It's not there. And then someone's like, I don't know. I don't think about these things. And I was like, I do. This is how my brain works.
That was like from that era where, there was a while where guitar was just banned in pop music, and now it's kind of back. And I mean, it's fucking crazy though, dude, that people are still...
I mean, Taylor Swift was just named by Rolling Stone, I think, the most 8th influential guitarist of the last 20 years.
Which makes sense.
Kinda, I guess. I don't think of her as a guitar player. I think of it her holding it as an accompaniment thing, but like not. I don't think of her as a guitar player, even though I know she can play.
But just if she did anything, she'd be at least the 8th most influential. I think it's like
sure.
Or like, and does she play guitar? Yes. Does she know how to? Sure, but it's like it depends on what the list is saying, right? Like I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. I love him. I know people, his voice isn't their cup of tea or whatever. So he was on the Rolling Stones, like greatest singers of all time. I think he was maybe like 7 or so. He was higher than Freddie Mercury. We'll put it that way, right? And it's like, as just a artist who happens to sing, sure, but like it's like no. On a vocal level, he is like, that would be crazy, right? So it's like, it depends on what you're really trying to say. Like, people who sing or like vocalists, So it's like people who play the guitar or like fucking guitar, like, Taylor's above Steve Vai, all those, it's like.
That actually, that's a good last question to end on.
Okay.
What would you rather be known for? a better vocalist or a better singer?
Oh, interesting. Probably a better singer, like because I would rather be known as a songwriter than a singer. Like I love that I get to do it, but that's where my ego is. Like if somebody was like, thought that somebody else sang on the record, I'll be like, huh, funny. But if somebody's like, yeah, you didn't write any of this shit, right? I'd be like, what the fuck? Like I just because I just work so hard on that, and I've
Right.
worked hard on my vocals, but I also think it's probably pretty obvious that it's me singing. I'm there with the mic or whatever. But there's a lot of bands, a lot of artists that don't actually write their own material. So and even when we work with co-writers, we're like very involved. And so yeah, I would say I'd rather be known as a singer or artist or whatever than a vocalist. But although I do love to sing, so
That's why I thought
come
it'd
in
be
and yodel on your track, dude.
Last question for you. Where can people find you or anything you would like to plug online?
It's at Rain City Drive on everything, or some iteration of at Matt McAndrew should get you there.
I got to say, the street sign was probably, when I saw that, I was like, that's such a clever piece of merch. I can't believe I wouldn't have ever thought of that.
Yeah,
And those
no,
things were selling like gangbusters at the at all the shows I've
crazy,
seen.
dude. Also, yeah, it's like a family friend had made one for Colin, just like for fun, and we're like, oh, that's pretty cool. So we found a company, and it's been so funny on these last couple tours. We'll try to order these big orders of them because they do sell so well, and the people are always like, all right, we can give you whatever, but we're not gonna. And I'm like, yo, we're good for it. Like we're selling selling a lot of these. Like just make as many as you can because it's not going to be enough, So
I was gonna say, I think that Atlanta date, I swear, I think I counted at least 25, and then people were
yeah,
going to buy them after the show was done because they didn't want
100%.
to carry them, and I was like, because I remember looking at it going like, oh, that's kind of cool, and then in my head I'm like, that's a really cumbersome piece of merch. I bet it doesn't fucking sell. Kind of not worth worth the headache it probably cost to get them
Yeah,
made. And then I just ate my words watching them, just people like slapping their fucking money down, like, give me one. And I was like, shit,
I think
man,
it's
these
just
things are
that
selling like
cool,
gangbusters.
yeah. If you're in the garage or something,
Yeah.
or the fucking man cave, and you just have the little streets, it's just something different that.
Yeah. Well, it's like skate decks. Like, I mean, a lot of I have a couple of skate decks here in my office. And
Oh,
at
sick,
first, like
dude.
when I got them, like most of them are my Aaliyah skate decks, and then I got a Foo Fighters Color in the Shape skate deck because that's like my favorite record. And it was a thing
Mm,
like when I've been putting them in different places and the way like you display them, like when I used to have my office in a different setting and you could see the skate decks behind me, I had someone comment, they're like, I hate people like you who buy skate decks and don't ever fucking skate. Like clearly you don't skate. And I was like I commented to one kid, I was like, dude, one of those skate decks is like $400. Like that's how much I paid for it. I'm not skating on that. Like I'll go to the store and go buy like a shitty pre-made deck for like
yeah, it's like,
$100. Like
oh,
I'm
this
not.
fucking it's the most expensive front side board ever, dude.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's like, dude, like you can go ahead and rip on me, but there's $1,200 sitting on my wall over there. It's like a
yeah,
piece of.
I just think it's fun. I think it's a cool fusion of things. Like I saw somebody had like a Monet painting that was broken up into like
Mm,
3 or 4 different decks that was like staggered. I'm like, that's a cool different way to see
yeah,
things we've seen before,
yeah, but
Uh,
that's exactly how I felt when I saw the thing. I was like, that's a cool piece of merch. Probably really cumbersome. Probably the profit margins aren't great on it. Da da da. And I was just like shitting on it in my head. And then when I
mhm.
watched everyone just buying them, I was like, fuck, man, okay.
You
And
never
then, like I
know,
said, I
dude.
saw you guys in like that same tour in another spot, and then I was like, same thing. Just kept watching everyone buying them all up, and I was like, damn, they're killing it. That is a really it's so low key because like it's probably really easy to set in a box on like shirts and stuff that'll crumple and all this. I was like, actually, that is a really clever idea, and it probably is actually killing on the margins because I'm sure if you buy enough of those, just like anything, like the margins go significantly higher. But
For
it was
sure.
one
Yeah.
where even in my head, like I said, I was shit talking it, and then I was like, nope, I'm wrong.
Well, we like try to get the nice ones too that are like
Yeah,
pretty
reflective and
hefty.
all that
So
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, cool, man.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking the time and enjoy the rest of your day. And looking forward to the record coming out whenever that does, probably in the next 4 to 5 months. for vinyl?
I think it's coming out in the fall. It'll be out. And we got a few more singles and yeah, I think like 6 singles total, but a pretty full album. So there'll still be a lot of surprises on there for everybody, and we'll probably have a deluxe. We're doing a headline tour. We're doing all the things, but yeah, I'll be interested to hear what you think about the record. Give me a shout when you check it out.
So that was my conversation with Matt. Want to thank him once again for taking the time. And, honestly, it's kind of weird. I was thinking about this too in preparation for, doing these intros, outros. It was kind of interesting to have Matt actually apologize initially for being not late, but kind of having some stuff come up and to, apologize for life happening. And it's funny because that's something a lot of times I do. I'll apologize for things that honestly probably don't even need to be apologized for. And, again, it's funny in doing these podcasts when I do them and then coming back to them sometimes a week to sometimes it's a month or so. I think this one was almost a month ago at this point that we did this chat, maybe a little over. So it's kind of interesting just to think about where you were, things that have happened, and then kind of doing these and kind of getting back into this space you were, a month or so ago. And, obviously with my foot surgery and, I'm really trying to limit me bringing it up, but it is so much of literally everything I am doing currently revolves around my foot and the surgery and pretty much what I'm not able to do. I'm still in the phase of non-weight bearing on my foot. I'm getting really fucking good at using my knee scooter. Crutches, not so much. The crutches really are just a ancillary avenue for me to get in and out of something to then get into a car or to get back to my knee scooter. But it's been a wild journey going through all of this. So it's like I said in a couple episodes ago, I think I was talking about how it's almost like a reverse chronological order of things I was dealing with pre-surgery in some of these episodes, and then essentially my foot surgery happening, and now, kind of dealing with all of these firsts and all of these interesting things I'm going through and thoughts I have. Because like I said, all I can do is essentially sit, lay down, or sit in my office to do podcasts and stuff like that. But it has been really interesting to just kind of think about all these things. But kind of going back to the apology thing, like something I thought was interesting about it, and I had told Matt, was just like, it's fine, life happens. But I think about how interesting it is that we as people are so quick to apologize for things. Like that's the first thing we'll say is, oh, I'm sorry for blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you really stop for a second and think about it, it's like you're apologizing for the uncertainty of life happening to you. And to me, it's interesting that we do that. Like I tend to do it all the time. Like I'll apologize for shit that is out of my realm. Like, oh, I'm sorry I couldn't do this because I'm physically not able to. I apologize to a friend that I was reaching out to. Actually, two instances right away that happened literally today and a few days ago. I apologized to a friend of mine for coming over to touch up my palm tattoo because I literally could not get into the shop. When he's working, essentially, like I can't drive myself. I can't get there. I can't do anything. And, and a lot of times I need help getting into places. I need someone to hold open a door. I need, these things that make just everyday mobility and traveling hard. So it was a thing where I was like, hey, it would be really appreciative if you could come over to my house and do this. And so he did. And I apologized that I had to make him come to me because I couldn't come to him. And he said it was totally fine. It's not worth apologizing for. We're also hanging out. We're having dinner after this and all these kind of other things. It's also a hang. So it's not just this thing, but more than happy to do that for you and help you out. Today, I also was reaching out to another friend, and I was like, hey, I want to get my nose re-pierced. I don't think I'm going to be able to literally sit on the table chair thing that you guys have to do piercings to make you basically eye level with you guys, the artists, the piercers and such. And so I was like, if that's going to be a problem, I apologize. I'm really sorry. I'm just trying to think preemptively, is there a way that you can do this and that we can have it get done, somewhat soonish? But it was funny. Like, that was my first thing. I was like, sorry if this is such an inconvenience for you, having to navigate me wanting to do this. And, again, was reminded it's not that big of a deal. We can easily be accommodating and all these things. So it's funny that a lot of our general interactions with people, we are so quick to apologize for things that I don't think need to be apologized for. But I feel like we are all constantly in our own heads about wanting to be a burden to someone, to want to just make sure that people understand that you're aware of how precious someone else's time is and anything they do to help you. So kind of a random thought I've had the last couple of days in thinking about this episode and thinking about how, we had to move some things around to make this work on a different date. But obviously very appreciative of Matt and his time. I really hope you enjoy this chat, especially kind of getting into a little bit more of the nuances of touring and what touring and the behind the scenes stuff looks like for Matt and the rest of Rain City. I always enjoy those parts of the conversations, getting to have more people understand more of what the business side of the music business looks like. I find it infinitely fascinating, and based on some of the comments and DMs and such I've gotten from all of you, especially after the Andrew chat, which obviously I name dropped Andrew a ton in this conversation, but he's the homie. I really love him, and I really think that he is doing a lot of things on a great big level, and it's great to see all his hard work finally paying off on such a bigger level. So obviously with Matt touring with them, probably has a lot of similar stories and things to discuss about Andrew as well, but is a thing where it's just great to see, like I said, the success of Rain City Drive and everything that Matt and all of them have been putting into it, and obviously just, seems like they have a good head on their shoulders about what they want and where they want to go at this point. So all of that said, let's start wrapping up the episode. If you would like to keep up with Rain City Drive, tour dates, and all that kind of good stuff, head on over to raincitydrive.com. That is the landing page for everything for them, tour dates, merch, anything you could possibly want to know about the band, it'll be there. Otherwise, you can go to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Rain City Drive. Really great when a band is able to just secure all the same names for their socials. Makes it super easy. If you would like to keep up with Matt, you can find him on Instagram at Matt McAndrew Music and Twitter at Matt McAndrew. I know he does vocal lessons and stuff like that, so obviously hit him up for any of those kind of things. I think he's been doing a few more features, so if you're interested in getting him on something, again, go to his socials. I'm sure there's an email or something to reach out to him, but always great getting to chat with him. And if you'd like to keep up with the podcast, you can follow us simple enough at BrewSpeakPod on all your major social media platforms. Email me at brewtallyspeaking@gmail.com. Rate, review, subscribe on whatever platform you're using to listen to this or watch this, whatever you are able to do. Any of those things always helps, always does the things that it's supposed to do to get you into algorithms, sharing with friends, all of those things greatly appreciated. And speaking of greatly appreciated, Rockabilia is greatly appreciated over here at the Brewtally Speaking podcast. Head on over to their website, rockabilia.com. Check out over the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of items they have on their online store. New things, new collaborations always popping up. I just saw that they put out, just in time for back to school, some really cool band related backpacks like Sleep Token. I think I saw a Bring Me the Horizon backpack. So obviously, if you got a little one or even for yourself, go to their website, check it out. Use our code BREWtally at checkout and take 10% off your total purchase order. So not only are you supporting me, but you're supporting yourself and saving some money. But hey, all that said, it's been great. I've very much enjoyed all of you that are checking out these episodes, shooting me DMs and such, talking about the episode or something that you resonated with. Greatly appreciated. Keep doing it. I will see you next week with Rory from And So I Watched You From Afar. That was a really fun chat. Very much excited to get that one out to you. For the Brewtally Speaking podcast, I am John. I'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of yours.